All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Political Pariahs podcast. Two lifelong friends who like to sit around and talk politics every now and then. Hey, George.
Hey, Jack. How's it going?
It's going. This week, as is a timely news topic, and just because we were talking about it a little bit off air last week, we're talking about Trump's use of the military. I think both domestic and abroad, but domestic is become much more timely. And I want to start off with, for the audience, both of us grew up in LA. We went to high school in LA, but both of us were transplants to LA as kids. But we spent our teenage years in LA, so we have a very familiar connection to this place. So I just want to get your thoughts, just kind of high level, when the National Guard was deployed to LA this year. You were not here in LA, right?
No, I was not, but I definitely followed closely on social media. I have friends from the Marine Corps who are now guardsmen in LA. So I was texting them, poking a little fun and keeping up with the news cycle.
How did that? So this is interesting from their perspective. Was this a positive experience, a negative experience, kind of neutral, just another day on the job?
For most of the guys I talked to, it was fairly neutral. I mean, most of them are deployed around federal buildings, just standing around on guard duty essentially. At the same time, it was the summertime, so classes aren't in session, guys aren't really in school, so they're not really missing out on much. So I think for a lot of guys, it was just an extra paycheck, and they did their job.
Well, that's really interesting because I think from the political side of it, you see a lot of the immediate, this is dictatorial territory, society is coming to an end, right? We got a lot of very provocative news stories around this from the left, and the right of, we're cracking down on riots and unruly cities full of crime. And then you hear from the, I was texting guys who were doing it. This is why I love our conversations. I was texting some guys who were there, and it was an extra paycheck deployment, right? We kind of cut through some of the political noise on this. And a lot of them did really just stand around, right?
Yeah, because I mean, look, guardsmen, reservists, most don't have, police authority. They can't go arresting citizens. At the same time, I doubt their command would want them to. That's frankly, having been in the military and knowing the 17, 18, 19-year-olds, we tend to not give those kinds of duties to them. So you're going to have them walking around picking up trash, mowing the grass, I think is what they're doing in DC right now, and just guarding federal buildings. You didn't see them really going into high crime areas and fighting crime or engaging with protesters. If anything, they free up local resources, right? Like the LAPD doesn't have to guard the courthouse. They can go engage with protesters. The National Guard can guard the courthouse. So there is a little trade-off there, but the Guard itself isn't, going around with 240s and M16s and stopping riots. That's not their mission. And, they're ill-trained and ill-equipped to do that.
I like this point, this ill-trained and ill-equipped, right? You're not stopping crime. No. That's not what you're trained for. That's not what you're there for. It's not what you're good at. The U.S. military is good at a lot of things. Running around catching burglars is not one of them.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct on that. And when you look at a police academy versus military training, the police academies focus on combat and fighting. I think it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks out of their 3 to 6 month program. The majority of it is procedures, laws, understanding chain of evidence, and making sure that you're following procedure and everything can be held up in court. The National Guard doesn't get that training. So you really don't want them performing law enforcement duties. The National Guard is going to arrest a guy, forget to read him his Miranda rights, and he walks free. I think it's easy for us to get caught up in the media hype and forget about there are laws behind this. There's a process behind everything. And we're not just going to trust an 18-year-old private to go enforce those laws.
Initially, one of the interesting things about the LA deployment was it came at a time where Trump's approval rating was very low. And this was one of the political stunts that Steve Bannon very eloquently said For those of you who don't know, Steve Bannon was one of Trump's advisors during the first term. He used to run Breitbart, the media outlet, and he's generally known for associating with neo-Nazis. So we kind of let him live in that world. But Steve Bannon called this flooding the zone. But the idea is that whenever you have bad press, you just start to spew out as much press-worthy stuff as possible to get the media to move on. Trump's very good at this. And to be clear, all politicians do this. Trump's just really good at it. So it's even more obvious when it happens, because the media turns from day to day on these stories, and they move on pretty quickly. But going from being starting to become a more unpopular on immigration, on the deportation bit, to suddenly being validated about all this criticism of cities and blue state governors, when the only way to get images of people protesting in LA is to engage with protesters in LA, right? Because even if you engage with protesters and you get just a small minority to be violent, and statistically speaking, most of these demonstrations on the left and the right, only about 5% of them turn violent. And it's consistent across both sides. But what you do get is every time they turn violent, you get images you can play on the news cycle for the next couple of days of dudes standing on top of burning cop cars.
Oh, absolutely.
And you get those kind of no matter what the protest is about. Mm-hmm. And so if you can see the protest starting to happen, you ratchet it up to 11 by throwing guardsmen in there. Even if the guardsmen aren't engaging with the protesters, it ratchets up the protesters. We begin to feel like there's these dictatorial moves, being placed against them, and they riot, right?
No, it certainly raises the pressure and the tension of the situation. And I think what you're saying is correct. Like, this all seems to be mostly a media play or a distraction play, whether it's deploying guardsmen to DC to clean up the city. I haven't seen videos of guardsmen going into the hood and, getting guys with shiesties. I've seen them patrolling the Capitol building and, hanging around monuments, interacting with people. I've seen people just, making jokes, making fun, playing around with them. It doesn't seem like that the serious crime fighting deployment. And if we were serious about crime fighting deployments, we'd also be talking about places like Memphis, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the number one murder capital in America. It's either number one or number two, but it's not purely a blue state problem. There are red states with poverty issues and crime issues. And I haven't seen a single guardsman or Marine patrolling a rough neighborhood.
It's not politically advantageous. This is one of the things I've been kind of circling back to. It's politically advantageous to stoke and to fight back against Democratic governors, right? Gavin Newsom, my governor, is very, very good at being angry at Trump.
He's gotten very good past 6 months. He's definitely going all in.
He's very good at it. And I say this from a very politically neutral standpoint about Newsom. Whether you like or don't like what he says, he's got what the kids call riz, right? He can churn up media coverage. He can get people talking. He can get himself played on air. And that's important for politicians, generally speaking. And he's very good at it. And so, but Trump is his fuel, right? I haven't seen Newsom be very good at this kind of campaigning outside of the Trump sphere. When Biden was president, Newsom had a much more I'm the status quo, establishment Democrat vibe. I'll make sure the ship keeps, steady, whatever. But every election is a change election now. And Newsom wants to run in 2028. He says he doesn't, but
he will.
He does.
He will. You don't do all this without running. Come on.
And I loved when this whole initial guardsman thing was happening, he he sent out a message at Stephen Miller. Gavin Newsom called Miller a fascist cuck on Twitter. And when he was confronted, some reporter was like, Mr. Governor, this is inappropriate language for you to use. Like, why would you say that? And he gets up in the mic and he says, well, that's the language that they understand. So that's the language I'm going to speak to them. But it was very indicative of this new style of politics, which I think up until hearing that speech from Newsom had just plainly been part of the right's new tactic.
I think Newsom is taking pages out of the Trump playbook. I think he's decided that, I'm done taking the high road. I'm going to meet Trump where he's at. If you look at his tweets or X, Blue Sky, whatever posts, he's starting to mirror that Trump language in all caps, mocking him. And he's certainly getting much more aggressive. I think he's picking up a rise in popularity from being the anti-Trump. I lived in California under Newsom's governorship for quite a while. I got to experience the COVID response under Newsom's governorship, and he was very unpopular. There was a lot of scandals, a lot of things that he did that were questionable, decisions he made that were questionable. I think as a state as a whole, even a lot of Democrats were kind of anti-Newsom at that time. So I think if he purely rode on that popularity, he stood no chance in 2028. But now coming in as this anti-Trump figurehead in the Democrat Party, being willing to kind of meet Trump where he's at, play a little dirty, it gives him a chance in 2028. However, Trump's not on the running in 2028, and it's Newsom versus JD Vance, who's the MAGA base is unlikely to stick to. Then is Newsom going to be out of steam? What else does he bring to the table other than being the anti-Trump? That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and and let history not be forgotten that Newsom had a recall election, right? Mm-hmm. And to get recalled, it's not as simple as the Republicans don't like you. There had to be traction for the recall, and it was because of the poor handling and the hypocritical behavior during COVID, right? He was giving speeches telling us to stay inside, and it's our patriotic duty to not go out with friends, and then that later on he gets caught going out with friends and hanging out during lockdown times, right? He had
dining with CEOs at French Laundry and all that. There's so many.
He had restaurants that would open up for him to come in and do whatever, so he needed the rebrand. He got it. Mm-hmm. Partially using this National Guard deployment to LA, right? This was part of what began this whole saga was that, and now we're at this gerrymandering issue. Mm-hmm. And it's been interesting from a Californian perspective, hearing the different perspectives of people, because I was going into it assuming that I would hear a lot of people say, well, we're willing to play dirty too. We're willing to do what we have to do to, preserve democracy and fight the Texan gerrymandering, whatever. I got a lot of nuanced replies of well, I don't like it. I don't want to lose, right? If Texas is just going to drum up seats and then we're not, that's also bad. And I don't want that, but I don't want to cheat the system, because it's clear to everyone involved that gerrymandering is this very gray area. It's legal to do, and I guess we just can, but that doesn't mean that it's good for democracy's spirit.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. The question comes to mind is where does it end, right? What's the ending point? When are we calling it fair? And I had the same argument for Democrats 4 years ago when they were talking about stacking the Supreme Court and adding additional seats to the Supreme Court. And I said, okay, you can add some now, but you know what? A Republican's going to be in charge in a couple of years, and they could do the same. So what's going to happen in 100 years? Are we going to have a 400-person Supreme Court? Where does this end?
Argentina. Well, this was because I was upset about the whole stacking the court thing for this exact reason, right?
Right. It's a bad precedent.
Yeah, I understand why they wanted to stack the court, and it was because Trump got an unusually high number of appointees who imbalanced the court in a lot of ways. politically, but that's just life, right? Like that's just the cycle of politics. Ginsburg's hate couldn't keep her going for an extra couple months or whatever, like that's
Yep.
just how it is. And over long periods of time, these things even out. Now, of course, I'm sure there are people immediately thinking of like, but Roe v. Wade, right? And whatever other large, I mean, there was a couple large court cases that this current court has weighed in on, that they did so from a place that we weren't expecting. But it is to say that there is a good amount of like, this is just normal political fare that we kind of have to deal with sometimes. And the answer can't be, let's find the best way to cheat.
Exactly. It ebbs and flows. And you know what? Republicans in the 90s had to deal with the assault weapons ban and the Supreme Court not striking that down. Today's Supreme Court, no way they would let that stand, right?
No chance.
And with Roe v. Wade, vice versa, it's going to ebb and flow. So I don't like this approach of we're losing, let's change the game, let's cheat. I think we've survived as a democracy for a long time. We've prospered because of the foundations and the rules that have been set before us. And I think the more we mess with those precedents, it can get a little risky. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm not happy with the gerrymandering stuff either. I see it from a California perspective. It could be a necessary evil to counteract what's happening in Texas. But again, where does it end,
And it's a tit for tat response. In as interesting as this is, of like the way that the California version is worded is this only goes into effect if Texas does what they're going to do, and only if they actually get the seats. And there's like they've written it in such a way that it's designed that if the Texan version fails, that they're not also rigging up California anyway. So they're trying to do it in like I don't know how you cheat responsibly, but that's the goal.
I respect that, and I do wonder how much the media is covering that, because I mean I have a pretty mixed social media feed, so sometimes I'll get an Instagram post with a ton of engagement on it that's like Newsom is gerrymandering and Texas is going to stop it and fix it, where they're on social media they're flipping the script, like it's not a California response, like California is so gerrymandered and bad that Texas needs to be gerrymandered to meet the Democrats where they're at, right? They're saying that the Democrats already gerrymandered it so poorly, that Texas is making things fair. So it's interesting to see how, even with the Democrats baking in all of these like controls and trying to be so like polite about it, the right-wing media sphere does not care, won't even mention it, and if anything will like twist it into the opposite. So
there was, and I forget his name, unfortunately. I can look it up real quick, actually. Roger Ailes. So this reminds me of a great miniseries that I recommend
on Hulu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it HBO? The Loudest Voice?
Yeah.
You recommended this to me initially, George.
Oh.
A long time ago. Well, in 2019 when it came out. About Roger Ailes, was a Fox executive during the Obama years that did a lot of damage to media narratives and has ushered in, truthfully, what we call the post-truth world that we live in now in politics. Mm-hmm. In that, and this is to go to your point about, social media narratives being what they are, is that because we're so algorithmically fed, the algorithms favor echo chambers and bubbles. They favor engagement over credibility. And so you end up in a world where the truth doesn't necessarily matter, the cosmic truth. What matters is the truth that you can sell to people.
Right.
And it's often the comforting truth. It's the truth they want. So since Trump has come to president, Democrat feeds have just been full of like anger, because they want to be outraged about everything he does, even about things that aren't actually his fault. I think Trump gets a lot of flack for things that aren't in his control, which he takes and refuses credit for often. right? I love that line where he's like, the NBC said, well, when is it the Trump economy, right? What's the date at which we can say you can take credit for it? And he says, well, it's already happened, but only the good parts. The good parts are the Trump economy, and the bad parts are the Biden economy. And of course he said the quiet part out loud, because that's true for all politicians. Trump's just bold enough to say it on TV. But we get to this point where like all that matters is the truth that he can sell you, because there were people who heard that and believed him, who were like, yes, it's true. Everything was bad, and so everything good is him correcting the bad. Right. And everything that is still bad or will be bad is a remnant of the old, corrupt and useless regime before him.
Biden regime. Yeah, the Biden regime.
The Biden regime. Biden is this boogeyman, kind of used. And Trump is too for the other side. Right. On CNN, they get their ratings dropped horrifically during the Biden years because people weren't tuning in to be angry about Trump anymore. And even when you did tune in, it was still tons of Trump stuff because that was their best engagement farm. It is. And I wonder what it will do to this gerrymandering issue moving forward. Because I'm sure Texas and California are not the end of it, right?
No.
We've been seeing this local gerrymandering going on for decades and decades.
And even with Texas and California, now I'm hearing mentions of other states jumping in, right? So that's what I mean. Like, when does it end? Texas does it, California balances out. Okay, let's find another red state, gerrymander that.
And I wonder too, this is interesting. One of the things that gerrymandering is predicated on is that you can generally predict how voters are going to vote based on different demographics about them. You can't see, when looking at these maps we can't see like who specifically voted where. We just see like people from this area voted a certain percentage. And we can use that to group them in certain ways. And that's gerrymandering, right? Is grouping them very creatively in order to ensure outcomes, right? If you've got 9 Republicans and 1 Democrat living in an area, I can tell you who's going to win. And so we just make sure that, all these are set up. But I wonder if some of our assumptions are going to be wrong in the future. And this is partially because I think the young vote is so much less sticky, right? We saw that like Democrats shed young voters this last cycle. Like young people just like hated the Democratic Party. But part of it was because young leftists are like, Gaza's the only issue they care about.
Then Gen Z males, are actually right wing for the first time. So, that's also a huge shift that is going to play a part in it in the future. If you're gerrymandering based off of age, expecting young folks to vote blue, that might not be the case with Gen Z.
And this is interesting because it's across the globe. Young men are drifting right. This is happening in Europe and South Korea too, and Japan.
It's history. You're a student of history, right? Economic hardship, job hardship. What happens? Society drifts right. Men drift right. We've seen it 100 years ago. You were the history teacher. You tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, and this is interesting because even in like the Great Depression, we go into it with a conservative. And Hoover was very free market, right? He didn't intervene in the Depression because conservative economics at the time were anti-Keynes. They're saying you're supposed to let the free market do its thing. The invisible hand will rescue us eventually. And Keynes was running around telling everyone who would listen, let's pump money into the economy and you can fix any given economic downturn with stimulus, right? Liquidity is king. So we just raise liquidity and everything will be okay. And we elected a Democrat who went and did that. And that was the New Deal. But what we learned though from it, people tend to drift authoritarian during these bad times.
Right.
Because the difference wasn't necessarily left or right, but that FDR was willing to have the state take care of it, top down, and Hoover said, I need businesses to kick up. Like, your mom and pop's got to kick it into gear because the economy's not doing so well.
That really echoes the Biden-Trump argument on inflation, doesn't it? Biden saying this is a business issue. This is profit gouging. Businesses need to step up. And Trump kind of blaming it on federal policy, government policy.
Yeah, he said, and he says, I can fix it.
Yeah.
Right? Elect me, and I will come in and I will take care of it. It doesn't matter what level inflation's actually at. By the time Biden left office, inflation was back below 3%.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter what it was at. What matters is who has the solution. Right. And I think neither of them have the actual solution. We know the solution to rising inflation is not lowering rates. All Trump wants is lowered rates. I get it. His government wants to borrow a lot of money, and it's very expensive to borrow money at the current rate, right? It's going to bankrupt the government in like 10 years. So we have to lower rates basically now, or else we're going to go bankrupt. This is one of the few things I agree with Trump on, not because lowering rates is a good idea for the economy, at least not all at once, right? Like he's like, just cut 100 points tomorrow, deal with the issues that brings up later. I don't think that's a good idea. But it is from the Treasury standpoint. Like we are actually at not crisis levels, but we're heading towards crisis levels of interest payments very soon. We spend double on interest payments than on veterans and federal education combined. Like presently, that's not a projection. That's a receipt.
I mean, that's an insane stat, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, do you think that puts us in a very difficult position where we're not in a good position economically to lower rates? We're forced to lower rates, right? Just to save ourselves from bankruptcy in 10 years. But what is that going to mean for our economy long term, right? Like maybe we'll save ourselves from bankruptcy, but are we about to kick off hyperinflation just to prevent that,
That's the real question, is like how much inflation will it actually stoke, and can we pull it off, right? That's the other thing, is that if growth, and there's two great quotes here. The first is JFK, who says, how he's talking to an economist, and this was a guy who was trained by Keynes, right, who helped us get through the Great Depression. JFK's dad was commissioner of the SEC during the Great Depression. And so he's plugged in his whole life to politics and economics and markets, and he's sitting there talking to an economist, and he says, wait, there is no cap to the debt. And the economist says, that's right. The only cap to the federal debt that exists is that eventually, if you get too much of it, it'll create inflation. So long as you don't stoke inflation, you can have as much debt as you want. There is no limit. Right? And this was back when debt was based on gold. If you had to borrow money as the U.S., you had to have gold reserves to back it up. Now it's just based on an IOU. We'll pay you back later, we swear. Fair enough. If we don't pay you back, the whole global banking system collapses. So, we have a good incentive to pay you back. But it's a good reminder that the actual numbers don't matter. All that matters is our ability to keep inflation low. Because so long as we grow, and this is the second quote, is that inflation is only a problem if it outpaces growth. Right? We see this in third world countries, and I hate that I can compare the future U.S. economy to third world countries, but we see this in third world countries where if you have 10% inflation, the public doesn't bat an eye so long as wage growth is 20%. Right? They're like, so long as they continue to grow faster than you inflate, it's okay. And we kind of see that in America too. Like even if inflation's a little high, we tend to shrug it off so long as our wage growth. I mean, truthfully, even though everyone was pissed off about the 2022 inflation, we didn't stop our buying. Like consumerism didn't decrease at all.
Well, yes, but consumer debt increased, right?
That's true.
So we kept buying, but we put it on credit cards because we have no self-control. So I don't know if it was necessarily, because I'll tell you this. I don't think wages have kept up, not in my industry. In my industry, wages have stayed the same for the past 15 years. The folks I work with right now on a per contract basis get paid the same or less than they did 15 years ago. Wow. Meanwhile, you have inflation from COVID, and these are professionals, right? White collar, high level consulting work. And meanwhile, you have, the COVID era inflation that happened, everything that's happened in the past 15 years. So I would say wages haven't really kept up the way that they would have in a third world country. And that's what scares me, right? With the upcoming inflation that we might see, I haven't really seen wages move.
Yeah. And when we look at wages, a lot of the movement we're seeing is in senior positions and in a lot of these positions that are going away, right? There are a lot of the positions that are being taken out, like federal government jobs, which are guaranteed COLAs, and because their wages go up proportionately to inflation, right? Or whatever the government says inflation is.
Right.
I don't know if you saw this chart. They recently, so in May, they made a big switch in how they calculate CPI data. And this is before the head of the BLS was fired, right? So she was already working on this before she got fired by Trump. But they're guessing. They impute data, which is the fancy word for guess. They used to impute about 10% of CPI. And this makes sense. There's tons of stuff in CPI like seasonal apparel, right? So heavy winter jackets during summer tend to all be sitting in the clearance rack. So their prices drop tremendously. And we don't want this to affect CPI. So we don't look at the seasonal apparel. We just guess their inflation based on regular apparel. If all jackets are going up, then the heavy jackets probably did too. And those are things that it's not very controversial that we guess on 10% of items. But now we're guessing on 30% of items, or almost a third of our CPI is imputed data. Because Doge fired all the people who were supposed to go into the actual grocery stores and record pricing. They're all gone. They're replaced, they're replaceable because Grok can impugn the data.
Right.
So Grok for Government is now calculating CPI, and the people who used to go around and actually record the data are gone.
Because Grok has been so accurate on Twitter.
The price of bread went up. Grok, is this true?
How would Grok know? Does Grok go to the grocery store?
Grok is just guessing, right? It's like
we need people to upload receipts to Grok to teach it.
It's your patriotic duty to upload receipts to Grok.
I'm going to start uploading my grocery bills to ChatGPT just so next time somebody asks what's the average carton of milk cost in Dane County, Wisconsin, it'll pull up my receipt for reference and know.
They've got you. So this is part of the problem with the government data is like we're talking about inflation as if we can trust the data being accurate. Wage growth goes up 4%, which is what it's at this year, right? Inflation's 2.5%, maybe 2.8 now. But the question is how much of that 2.8 is accurate?
And that's a really scary place to be in. I mean, coming from a post-Soviet world, myself and my family, that's a place we've been. That's how numbers were reported out there and still are in Russia.
So Putin wins in Chechnya. That's my favorite stat, is he wins the Chechen vote every year, despite the fact that they have a pretty widespread independence movement. He routinely sends down troop deployment. This is very Trump. He routinely sends down troops to clean up their cities. And, he's been horrible to some of the people in Dagestan. He wins there too.
And by clean up, you mean level with artillery, yeah.
Yeah, clean up in a very different sense from DC. The guys in DC are actually cleaning.
Yes, they are literally picking up trash. Oh, man.
Where does this... So I want to get your thoughts, just to circle back to military real quick. So we're getting close to our time. What were your thoughts on the military parade? we had earlier this year. Other than it corresponding with Trump's birthday, and I want to, whatever, let him have his parade. But how did you feel about the actual parade?
I mean, look, I think if you wanted to celebrate the most important military birthday, you would have had a parade for the Marine Corps birthday, not the Army. And that's why I think this was a parade for Donald Trump, not for the actual military. Because the most important birthday is in November.
Do you know the date?
Do you, buddy? You should. You're my best friend. November 10th, baby.
November 10th. And that's how we know it was a political stunt.
Exactly.
I'm with that. I was listening to my grandmother is a little bit I say a little bit, she's very anti-Trump. So I take this with a grain of salt that like everything he does is bad, right? But she was laughing. She was, for context, she lived on military bases for most of her life, right? And she was married to a serviceman who was in the Air Force for 30 years. And she was complaining not about the parade happening, not about them, it being on his birthday or whatever. And she's like, they just looked unenthusiastic. Like they didn't look like they wanted to be there.
No, I can tell you they didn't. I
thought it was so funny that she's like, if you're at least going to put on like a third world military parade, make them march like the North Koreans. Like they got to have gusto.
Well, the North Koreans fear execution, right?
Yeah, I was like, they march for a different reason.
Yeah. But I'll have to tell you, I've never really met a service member who loved marching and drill and parade, and like change of command ceremonies were the worst.
That's what I said. I said, Nana, you got to remember that like our servicemen, like the thing that's important to the chain of command right now is getting these guys ready to tackle like a potential war with China, right? We're retooling the Marine Corps and selling all their tanks and buying rocket artillery to go post up in the jungle islands outside Japan, right? And all these things. Like we're not thinking about looking really good in the military parade. When you're North Korea, the only thing you have to look forward to is the military parade.
That's very true. I mean, look, you march in boot camp and you do all that in basic, but afterwards, no, that's not a thing in our military. We have more important to do.
More important things to do. That's what I'm saying. I was telling her this of like, as much as I want to say they didn't look that great or whatever, maybe that was the point for Trump, was to have them look great or whatever. And we can talk about whether he failed on that or not, but it was about like, we just have more important things to do. And I think we have more important things to do than be sitting around in DC too.
I'm with you there. I mean, look, not just from a military perspective, these are National Guardsmen. So they're part-time troops, right? They have real jobs, and most of them likely are in college. This past week, the week before that, I believe, was the first week of school for a lot of universities. So you have a lot of Guardsmen right now. They're missing their class registration. They're missing their first day of class. They're having to probably write emails to their teachers asking them to please not drop them for their absence and whatever else. And beyond that,
oh, what a tough position, having to write in an email. Please don't drop me from this class. I'm deployed by the president. Oh,
here's a copy of my orders, The other piece of that is, as a guardsman or as a reservist, you don't get full education benefits. Your benefits are tied as a percentage based on active duty time on orders. And it's only specific types of orders that count towards that active duty time. So if you're a National Guardsman and you went your whole time in the Guard, you didn't deploy anywhere, you didn't really do anything, you're not getting free college or you're not getting a VA home loan. But if you're a guardsman and you got Title 10 orders to respond to some national emergency for a hurricane, or you got sent overseas to Iraq for a certain period of time, then you would qualify for those benefits. Now, I'm not sure what kind of orders these guardsmen are under. I would certainly hope that they at least gave them Title 10 orders that are greater than, I believe it has to be greater than 29 days for it to count towards their education benefit. But I have no idea. I know in the Marine Corps Reserves, it was common to get orders just to 29 days. And then they would give you basically a day without orders. You were off for a day and you came back for another 29 days just so that you wouldn't get it counted towards your education benefit, towards your VA benefits.
Wow. That's things that we don't think about that often. We're talking about all this, and this is why I want to bring up this topic this week. Was I knew we'd get some good insight out of this. But yeah, I didn't think about that. Of like these guys might not even be earning benefits while they're out there.
Yeah, I mean they're earning pay, right?
Right,
They
right.
should be getting paid, but we don't know. At least I personally don't know if these are Title 10 orders or Title 32 or SAD, what kind of orders they are, and
They
if
might
they even
not
count.
last long enough, right? If they're only
No,
deployed for a couple weeks, it doesn't count.
yeah,
Oh, fascinating.
which really sucks, right? Like at least for me as a reservist, I certainly asked about deployments, but all the deployments I asked about were overseas. I never wished for a deployment to, somewhere domestically to the southern border or something. That's well, we even talked. I texted my guardsmen friends who were in LA, and I said, "LA is not a real deployment," you know. So
Well, I'll leave that. That might be the name of the episode. LA isn't a real deployment. Fantastic. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you for joining us this week, everybody. If you're interested in following more of me, you can find me at jackbowman.substack.com or Jack Bowman on Seeking Alpha, where I write almost every day. And George, do you want to be found?
nope, you find me on this podcast.
Excellent. So we'll see you all next time.